My parents sold my dying grandmother's antique piano, the one she left specifically to me, and used the $450,000 to buy my sister a luxury car. They thought I would just cry about it. They thought Grandma Rose was too weak in hospice to do anything. But when I whispered the truth to her, she didn't cry. She simply picked up her phone, made one call to her shark of a lawyer, and whispered that it was time to introduce them to the real world. That single phone call didn't just take back the car. It left my parents homeless and erased them from a $15 million will. Before I tell you how we destroyed their entire false reality in less than 24 hours, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Please hit the like button and subscribe if you have ever had to watch a toxic family member get exactly what they deserved. My name is Sophia. I am 29 years old, and for my entire life, I have been the invisible bank account for my family. While I worked double shifts to become a certified antique appraiser, my younger sister Jasmine was busy being the golden child. In my parents' eyes, Jasmine was the star who needed to be polished, and I was just the fuel to keep her shining. But nothing could have prepared me for the sight that greeted me last Tuesday. I had just driven 6 hours from a business trip in Chicago, back to my parents' house in Atlanta. I was driving my 5-year-old Honda, a car I paid for with my own money. As I pulled into the long, winding driveway of my childhood home, I had to slam on my brakes. Blocking the entrance was a brand-new pearl-white Porsche Cayenne Turbo GT. It was wrapped in a massive red bow that looked like it cost more than my entire wardrobe. My stomach dropped. My parents had been complaining about money for months. They claimed they were behind on the mortgage. They claimed they couldn't afford the roof repairs. Yet here was a $200,000 SUV sitting in the driveway like a trophy. I parked my car on the grass, stepping out into the humid Georgia heat. Before I could even reach the front door flew open. Jasmine walked out holding her phone up high, a ring light clipped to the top of it. She was live streaming. Of course she was. "Hey guys, look who finally decided to show up in her little tin can car," Jasmine said to her phone screen, not even making eye contact with me. "My big sister Sophia is here to ruin the vibe as usual. But look at my new baby. Isn't she gorgeous? Mommy and Daddy really outdid themselves this time." I stared at her. "Jasmine? Where did you get this car?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. She rolled her eyes, finally glancing at me. "It is a gift, Sophia. For my brand, I need to look successful to attract high-value sponsors. You wouldn't understand. You work in dusty basements with old furniture." I pushed past her and walked into the house. The air conditioning hit me, but it didn't cool the burning rage starting to build in my chest. My parents' house was always immaculate. My mother Linda treated it like a museum. Nothing could be out of place. But as I walked into the formal living room, the room we were only allowed to enter on Christmas and Easter, I froze. The corner by the bay window was empty. For 50 years, that corner had been occupied by a 1950 Steinway Model D concert grand piano. It wasn't just a piano. It was Nana Rose's heart. Nana Rose, my grandmother, had been a jazz singer in Chicago back in the day. That piano was her most prized possession. When she moved into hospice care 3 months ago, she made me promise to look after it. She had legally gifted it to me 5 years ago in a notarized document saying that only I understood its soul. Now there was just a rectangular outline of dust on the hardwood floor where the legs used to stand. "Where is it?" I whispered. I turned around to see my mother Linda walking out of the kitchen. She was holding a glass of iced tea, wearing her tennis whites, looking as unbothered as if she had just swatted a fly. "Where is what, Sophia? Don't shout. You know I have a migraine," she said, taking a sip of her tea. "The piano, Mom. Nana Rose's Steinway. Where is it?" Linda waved her hand dismissively at the empty corner. "Oh, that old thing. We got rid of it. It was taking up too much space, and quite frankly, it was an eyesore. The wood was looking terrible." "You got rid of it?" I felt like I couldn't breathe. "What do you mean you got rid of it? Did you move it to storage?" "No, Sophia. We sold it." "Well, sold is a strong word. We found a bulk liquidator who was willing to take it off our hands for scrap wood and parts. It had termites, you know." "Termites." I stepped closer to her. That piano was inspected 6 months ago. It was pristine. Who did you sell it to? And why didn't you call me? That piano belongs to me. Linda laughed, a cold, sharp sound that echoed in the empty room. Belongs to you, Sophia, grow up. It was in my house. It took up my space. And honestly, you should be thanking us. The few $1,000s we got for that junk helped cover the down payment and the first year of insurance for Jasmine's new car. My knees almost gave out. I looked from my mother to the window where Jasmine was still posing with the Porsche. You sold a Steinway Model D for a down payment on a car. I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Do you have any idea what you have done? Stop being so dramatic, Linda snapped, setting her glass down on a coaster with a sharp clink. Jasmine needs this. She is building a career. She needs to network with Brad's family, and she can't do that driving a Toyota. You have a steady job. You have your little antique business. You are fine. Jasmine needs help. We did what was best for the family image. I looked at my mother. Really looked at her. I saw the arrogance in her eyes. I saw the complete lack of remorse. She didn't just sell a piano. She sold my inheritance. She sold the one thing my grandmother loved most in the world, just to buy a toy for her golden child. But there was something Linda didn't know. Something none of them knew. Because I am an appraiser, I knew exactly what that piano was. It wasn't just a standard Steinway. It was a custom build signed under the lid by Nina Simone herself after a private session in 1958. I had the provenance papers in my safe at home. That piano wasn't worth a few $1,000s. In the current market, that piano was worth $450,000. And if my mother had sold it to a liquidator for the price of a car down payment, she had either been scammed or she was lying to my face. I took a deep breath. I didn't scream. I didn't throw a vase. I remembered Nana Rose's voice telling me that anger is a waste of energy, but strategy is a weapon. Okay, I said calmly. Linda looked surprised. She had expected a fight. She had expected tears. Okay, she repeated. Yes, it is done right. Jasmine has the car. The piano is gone. I suppose there is no point in crying over spilled milk. Exactly. Linda smiled, relaxing her shoulders. I knew you would be reasonable eventually. You are the sensible one, Sophia. That is why we rely on you to understand. Now be a dear and go help your sister take some photos. She wants a shot of her driving away and I am too tired to hold the camera. I nodded. I turned around and walked out the front door. I walked past Jasmine, who was now draped across the hood of the Porsche, like a model in a bad magazine. Hey, Sophia, Jasmine yelled. Mom said you would take my picture. I didn't answer. I got into my old Honda. I started the engine. Where are you going? Jasmine shouted, her face twisting in annoyance. We have a dinner reservation at the club. Brad is meeting us there. I reversed out of the driveway, taking one last look at the Porsche, the house, and the empty space where my heart used to be. I wasn't going back to my apartment. I was going to the hospice center. I was going to tell Nana Rose everything. And I knew with absolute certainty that by the time the sun set tonight, that Porsche would be the least of their problems. My parents wanted to talk about Image Fine. We were about to show them what a real power move looked like. I sat in my Honda for a long time, my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The engine was idling, but I couldn't bring myself to drive away just yet. Something about my mother's story didn't sit right. Termites, scrap wood, a few $1,000s. My mother was a liar, but she was also a snob. She wouldn't let a scrap metal team drag a piano through her pristine hallway unless there was a significant incentive. I turned off the ignition. The house was quiet now, Jasmine and my mother having retreated inside to prepare for their precious celebratory dinner. I needed to know the truth before I faced them again. I stepped out of the car and walked quietly around the side of the garage. This was where my father kept the large recycling bins that were collected on Wednesday mornings. If they had sold the piano recently, the paper trail had to be somewhere. My heart was hammering against my ribs as I lifted the heavy blue lid. It was mostly filled with empty wine bottles and Amazon boxes, the remnants of their spending habits. I began to dig, pushing aside empty champagne cartons from Jasmine's earlier toast. Near the bottom, stuck to the side of a glossy magazine, I found it. It was a crumpled sheet of paper, coffee-stained and torn at the corner, but the letterhead was unmistakable. It wasn't a receipt from a junk hauler. It was a purchase order from Vanderbilt and Associates, a high-end private acquisition firm based in New York. I smoothed the paper out against the side of the bin, my eyes scanning the lines rapidly. Item description: 1950. Steinway Model D. Provenance confirmed. Signed, Nina Simone. Condition excellent. I felt the bile rise in my throat. They knew. They absolutely knew. The line about termites was just a cruel invention to make me feel like I was mourning garbage. But it was the number at the bottom of the page that made the world tilt on its axis. Total purchase price: $450,000. I had to lean against the brick wall of the garage to keep from sliding to the ground. $450,000. They hadn't just sold a piano. They had sold a house. They had sold a legacy. And they had lied to my face, claiming they got pennies for it just to justify buying a Porsche that cost half that amount. Where was the rest of the money? The answer was obvious. It was sitting in their bank account, ready to be wasted on country club fees and first-class flights, while I scraped by on my appraiser's salary, paying off my own student loans. I folded the paper carefully and placed it inside my bra. I couldn't let them know I had found it. Not yet. I remembered Nana Rose's voice in my head telling me that knowledge was power only when used at the right moment. I had to go to that dinner. I had to sit there and watch them, and I had to let them think they had won. I drove to the restaurant in a daze. It was a steakhouse downtown, the kind of place where the waiters wore tuxedos and the menu didn't have prices. When I arrived, the valet looked at my Honda with disdain before parking it behind a row of Mercedes and BMWs. Inside, my family was already seated at a prominent round table near the window. They looked like the perfect American family. My father, Marcus, was laughing loudly, holding a glass of scotch. My mother, Linda, was beaming, her pearls catching the light. Jasmine was taking a selfie with her husband, Brad. I walked to the table, my legs feeling heavy. "Oh, look who finally decided to join us," Brad said loudly, causing several heads to turn. "We thought you might be too busy crying over your firewood to eat." The table erupted in laughter. My father clapped Brad on the back, clearly delighted by the insult. "Sit down, Sophia," my mother said, gesturing to the empty chair that was slightly squeezed between Brad and a decorative plant. "Try not to look so miserable. This is a celebration." I sat down, placing my napkin in my lap. The waiter appeared, instantly pouring water into my crystal glass. I looked around the table. They were glowing. They were high on the adrenaline of new money. "So," Brad said, leaning back in his chair and swirling his red wine. He was a handsome man in a generic way, with perfectly styled hair and a suit that cost more than my car. He came from old money, or at least his parents did, and he had never worked a hard day in his life. "I was just telling Marcus here that the Porsche is really an investment. You know, the waiting list for the Turbo GT is 18 months. We actually did you guys a favor by taking that spot." "It is stunning," my mother gushed. "It suits Jasmine so well. She looks like a movie star in it." Jasmine giggled, looking at her reflection in her spoon. "I mean, I just feel like it elevates my personal brand. My followers are going crazy. Engagement is up 40% since I posted the reveal video." "That is what matters," my father said, nodding sagely. "Image is currency. You have to spend money to make money." I felt a sharp pain in my chest. They were talking about spending money they had stolen from me. Stolen from Nana Rose. "It is amazing what you can afford when you clear out the clutter," Brad said, turning his gaze directly on me. His eyes were cold, mocking. "Seriously, Sophia. I know you are sentimental, but you have to be realistic." That piano was taking up half the living room. It was basically a coffin on legs. It wasn't a coffin. I said, my voice steady despite the trembling of my hands beneath the table. It was a Steinway Model D. Do you know what that means, Brad? Brad laughed a dismissive snort. It means it was big, heavy, and old, just like the stuff you waste your time with at that little shop of yours. What do you call yourself? An appraiser. I am a certified antique appraiser, I corrected him. And in my line of work, we know that age adds value, not subtracts it. That piano was worth more than your car. The table went silent. My mother's smile faltered. My father put down his glass. Oh, here we go. Jasmine sighed, rolling her eyes. She is going to start with the history lesson. Nobody cares, Sophia. I am serious, I said, looking at my father. Dad, you told me you sold it for scrap, but a Model D, even in poor condition, is worth 6 figures. If you sold it for less, you were robbed. Or you are lying. My father's face darkened. The jovial church elder mask slipped, revealing the bully underneath. Watch your tone, Sophia, he growled low in his throat. I am just trying to understand. I pressed, feeling the piece of paper against my skin like a brand. You said you needed money for the car. A scrap dealer would give you maybe $500. That doesn't buy a Porsche. So where did the money come from? Brad slammed his hand on the table, making the silverware jump. God, you are jealous. It is pathetic, really. You are sitting here eating $100 steak that your parents are paying for, and you have the audacity to question their finances? I am questioning why my grandmother's legacy was liquidated without my consent, I said, my voice rising slightly. It wasn't your legacy, my mother hissed, leaning across the table. Her eyes were venomous. It was in my house. It belonged to us. And we decided that Jasmine needed a vehicle that reflected her potential. You, Sophia, you are fine. You have your little job. You have your apartment. You are surviving. Jasmine is thriving. There is a difference. I looked at Brad. He was smirking, enjoying the show. You know, Sophia, Brad drawled, picking up his steak knife. Maybe if you focus less on dusty old junk and more on the future, you would have something to show for your life. I mean, look at you. Nearly 30, no husband, driving a Honda, living in a rental. And you think you know better than Marcus about financial assets? The insult stung, but it was the truth in his tone that hurt more. He genuinely believed I was worthless because I wasn't flashy. I looked at my father, hoping for some defense, hoping he would say, Sophia is hardworking. Sophia is smart. Instead, Marcus wiped his mouth with his napkin and looked at me with cold indifference. Brad is right, Sophia. You are being petty. The money from the piano is for the family to manage. I am the head of this household. I decide where resources are allocated. But Nana left it to me, I whispered. Nana is dying. Sophia, my father snapped loud enough that the couple at the next table looked over. She doesn't know what day it is. And frankly, you are single. You have no children. You have no responsibilities. Why do you need assets? What are you going to do with a grand piano? Put it in your one-bedroom apartment? It is selfish. Selfish. The word hung in the air. I had spent my 20s paying my own bills, never asking them for a dime, while Jasmine lived rent-free and drove luxury cars funded by them, and I was the selfish one. Jasmine needs this car to find a husband to build a life. My father continued, his voice taking on a lecturing tone. She is securing the family's future. You are just drifting. When you get a husband, when you give me grandchildren, then maybe we can talk about inheritance. Until then, you sit there, you eat your dinner, and you be grateful we invited you at all. I looked down at my plate. The steak looked like ash. The wine looked like blood. I realized then that it wasn't about the piano. It wasn't even about the money. It was about me. In their eyes, I was a failure because I didn't fit their mold. I wasn't a trophy to be displayed. I was an appliance. Useful when needed, invisible when not, and easily discarded when something shinier came along. Brad raised his glass. To the Porsche, he said, winking at Jasmine, and to shedding dead weight. My parents raised their glasses. To the Porsche, they chorused. I didn't raise my glass. I sat there stone still as the clinking of crystal echoed in my ears. I felt the paper in my bra again. $450,000. They thought I was powerless. They thought I was just the bitter, jealous spinster sister. They had no idea that I wasn't just drifting. I was calculating. My father was right about one thing. Nana Rose was dying. But he was wrong about her mind. And he was definitely wrong about who controlled the future. As I watched Brad smirk at me over the rim of his glass, a cold resolve settled in my stomach, heavier and more solid than the steak I couldn't eat. They wanted to talk about value. They wanted to talk about assets. Fine, I would show them exactly what my value was. I took a sip of my water, swallowing the lump in my throat. "So, Brad," I said quietly, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes, "tell me more about the car. Does it have good safety ratings?" Brad's eyes lit up, sensing a surrender. "Oh, top of the line, Sophia. 5 stars. It practically drives itself." "That is good," I said softly. "You are going to need it." I didn't say the rest of the sentence. "You are going to need it when you are living in it." I picked up my fork and cut a small piece of meat. The dinner continued, the conversation flowing around me like sewage, but I was no longer drowning. I was floating. I was waiting. Tomorrow I would go to the hospice. Tomorrow I would play my card. But for tonight, I let them feast. After all, it would be the last expensive meal they would enjoy for a very, very long time. The drive from the steakhouse to the Golden Horizon Hospice Center was a blur of streetlights and tears that I angrily wiped away. I felt like a coward. I had sat there and let them toast to their theft, let them mock my career, and let them believe they had won. But beneath the cowardice there was a simmering rage that felt dangerous, like a pot left on the stove too long. I parked my Honda in the visitor lot, the silence of the night starkly different from the raucous laughter of the restaurant. The hospice center was beautiful in a sterile, terrifying way. It was designed to look like a high-end resort with manicured gardens and fountains, but the air always smelled of lilies and antiseptic. It was the smell of expensive waiting. I signed in at the front desk, the night nurse giving me a sympathetic smile. She knew me well. I was the only one who visited Nana Rose consistently. My parents and Jasmine only came when they needed to sign paperwork or when they wanted to perform piety for an audience. I walked down the carpeted hallway, the soft classical music piping through the speakers, feeling like a cruel joke. Nana hated elevator music. She used to say that Muzak was where real music went to die. Room 304 was dimly lit. The only light came from the glowing monitors and the street lamp outside the window. Nana Rose lay in the bed looking so small against the mountain of white pillows. The rhythmic whoosh and click of the oxygen machine was the only sound in the room. I pulled the chair close to the bed, the same uncomfortable vinyl chair I had sat in for hundreds of hours over the last 3 months. I looked at her hands. They were thin now, the skin like parchment paper bruised from IV lines. But I remembered when those hands were strong. I remembered them flying across the ivory keys of the Steinway, commanding the instrument with a power that shook the floorboards. She wasn't just a grandmother. She was Rose Sterling, a woman who had sung in smoky jazz clubs in Chicago when she wasn't even allowed to use the front door. She had built a legacy out of grit and melody, and now my parents had sold the symbol of that legacy for a car that would depreciate the moment it drove off the lot. I reached out and took her hand. It was cold. "Hey, Nana," I whispered, my voice cracking. "It is Sophia. I am here." She didn't move. Her chest rose and fell in that shallow, terrifying rhythm that signaled the end was near. The doctors said she was in the transition phase. They said she could hear us, but she couldn't respond. They said she was drifting between worlds. "I am so sorry, Nana," I said, the tears finally spilling over hot and fast down my cheeks. "I failed you. I promised I would protect your things. I promised I would keep the music alive. But I let them take it." I leaned my forehead against the metal rail of the bed, the cold steel pressing into my skin. "They sold the piano, Nana. They sold the Steinway. Mom and Dad took it while I was in Chicago. They sold it to a collector for $450,000, and they lied to me. They told me it was scrap wood. They used the money to buy Jasmine a Porsche. A Porsche Nana. Can you believe that they traded your soul for a status symbol? I sobbed quietly, the sound muffled by the bedsheets. I felt a crushing weight of guilt. I should have moved the piano sooner. I should have hired movers the day she got sick. But I didn't want to fight them. I didn't want to be the difficult daughter. And now, because of my hesitation, the music was gone. I know I should sue them, I whispered to the rhythmic whoosh of the machine. I found the receipt. I have the proof. But Nana, they are my parents. If I take them to court, if I expose them, the whole community will turn on me. The church, the neighbors, everyone. They will say I am ungrateful. They will say I am attacking a grieving family. I don't know if I have the strength to be the villain in their story. I squeezed her hand, wishing desperately for a squeeze back, for any sign that she forgave me. I am just so tired of fighting alone, Nana. I am tired of being the only one who remembers who you really were. They are waiting for you to die so they can sell the house. They are already planning the renovation. They don't care about the history. They only care about the equity. And I don't know how to stop them without destroying everything. I sat there for a long time, listening to the machine, letting the silence wrap around me. I felt defeated. I was ready to let go of her hand, to stand up and walk back out into the night, back to my small life and my small battles. But then the rhythm changed. The hand in mine didn't just feel cold anymore, it felt firm. I felt a squeeze, not a twitch. A deliberate, strong grip that made me gasp. I lifted my head, my eyes wide. Nana, slowly, impossibly. Nana Rose opened her eyes. They weren't cloudy. They weren't distant. They were sharp, clear, and burning with a fire I hadn't seen in years. It was the same look she used to give hecklers in the club before she sang them into silence. She took a deep breath, her chest expanding more fully than it had in weeks. Then, with a shaking hand, she reached up and pulled the oxygen mask away from her face. "Nana, no, you need that," I panicked, reaching to put it back. "Leave it," she rasped. Her voice was rough like gravel grinding on glass, but the words were distinct. I froze. "They sold my Steinway?" she asked. I nodded, unable to speak. "For a Porsche?" she asked again, her brow furrowing. "Yes," I whispered. "For Jasmine." Nana Rose let out a sound that was half laugh, half growl. She pushed herself up against the pillows, her movements slow but determined. The frailty was there, but the will overriding it was terrifying. "I am not dead yet, Sophia," she said, her voice gaining a little more strength. "And I am certainly not deaf. I have been lying here listening to your mother discuss paint colors for my living room for 3 weeks. I have heard your father praying for a swift transition so the probate courts can open early." She looked at me, her eyes softening just a fraction. "You didn't fail me, child. You are the only one who passed the test." "What test?" I asked, bewildered. "The test of character," she said. "I knew they would come for the money. I knew they would come for the things. Vultures always circle when they think the lion is asleep. But selling the piano, that is not just greed. That is a declaration of war." She pointed a trembling finger at the bedside table. "Give me my phone, Sophia." "But Nana, who are you calling?" "It is 10 o'clock at night. Give me the damn phone." I grabbed her smartphone from the drawer. It was fully charged. She snatched it from my hand with surprising speed. She didn't scroll through contacts. She dialed a number from memory, a number she clearly knew by heart. She put the phone to her ear, her eyes fixed on the ceiling as she waited. "Hello," came a deep, professional voice on the other end. I could hear it clearly in the quiet room. "Sterling," Nana said. Her voice changed. It wasn't the voice of a dying grandmother anymore. It was the voice of Rose Sterling, the businesswoman. "Rose, is everything all right?" The lawyer sounded awake instantly. "It is time," Nana said. There was a pause on the other end. Are you sure they sold the piano, Sterling? They forged the paperwork and sold the Model D. And they bought a car with it. I heard a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. Then a low chuckle. A cold, dangerous sound. Well then, the lawyer said. That changes the timeline. Do you want to initiate the protocol? Initiate everything, Nana said, her eyes locking with mine. Invoke the bad actor clause. Freeze the trust access. And Sterling, bring the full file on the house deed. I want a family meeting. When Sterling asked, tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. sharp. Tell them I am lucid. Tell them I am making final arrangements. Make them think they are coming to collect a check. Understood, Sterling said. I will have the papers ready. Get some rest, Rose. Show time is tomorrow. Nana hung up the phone and dropped it onto the sheets. She took a deep, shuddering breath and let me help her put the oxygen mask back on. She lay back against the pillows, closing her eyes for a moment to regain her strength. When she opened them again, she looked at me, and a small, wicked smile played at the corners of her mouth. You were afraid to be the villain, Sophia, she wheezed through the mask. I nodded. Good, she said. Because you are not the villain. You are the witness. I am the villain. And tomorrow I am going to remind your parents why nobody ever stole from Rose Sterling and lived to brag about it. Now stop crying and fix your face. We have a performance to prepare for. The door to the hospice room opened silently 20 minutes later. If Nana Rose was the queen of jazz, Arthur Sterling was the king of contracts. He walked in wearing a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than my annual tuition. He was a tall, silver-haired man with eyes like polished flint. He didn't look like a man who visited hospitals. He looked like a man who owned them. He didn't express shock at seeing Nana sitting up without her mask. He simply nodded, placed his leather briefcase on the rolling table, and clicked it open. Good evening, Rose, he said, his voice deep and smooth. I trust you are ready to dismantle the empire. I am ready to clean house. Sterling, Nana replied. Did you bring the file? Sterling pulled out a thick folder. It was labeled simply, The Estate. He looked at me, his expression softening just a fraction. Hello, Sophia. I assume you are the one who discovered the missing Steinway. I nodded, feeling small in the presence of their combined intensity. Yes, Mr. Sterling. I found the receipt in the recycling bin. Sterling sighed, a sound of professional disappointment. Amateurs. They always leave a paper trail. He turned back to Nana. Rose, I have reviewed the terms of the trust. Specifically, the bad actor clause we inserted in 1998. It is airtight. If any beneficiary is found to have defrauded the estate or misappropriated assets prior to your passing, they are automatically disqualified from the inheritance. Not partially disqualified. Fully. And the piano counts, I asked. Sterling looked at me over his rimless glasses. Sophia, the piano was a scheduled asset listed in the trust addendum. By selling it and forging your signature on the release forms, your parents committed 2 felonies. Theft by deception and forgery. In the eyes of the trust, they didn't just sell a piano. They tried to steal from the crown. So we strike now, I asked, feeling a rush of adrenaline. Do we call the police? No, Nana said sharply. I looked at her confused. But Nana, they spent the money. They have the car. That is exactly why we wait. Nana said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. If we strike now, they might still have enough cash left to hire a defense lawyer. They might claim it was a misunderstanding. They might try to settle. I don't want a settlement, Sophia. I want total capitulation. She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto mine. From this moment on, you are an actress. You are going to go back to that house. You are going to apologize. You are going to tell them that you were tired, emotional, and jealous. You are going to tell them that they were right to sell the piano. My stomach churned. Nana, I can't do that. I can't tell them they were right. It makes me sick. You will do it because silence is golden, Sophia. Nana insisted. You need to let them feel safe. When people feel safe, they get careless. They get greedy. Let them spend every dime of that $450,000. Let them think the money tap is open. Let them dig the hole so deep that by the time we push them in, they won't even see the bottom. Sterling nodded in agreement. A false sense of security is the most dangerous weapon in litigation. Let them incriminate themselves further. We need them to be completely unrepentant when the hammer drops. I took a deep breath. I looked at Nana frail but fierce, and Sterling cold and calculating. I realized I wasn't just the granddaughter anymore. I was the operative. Okay, I said. I can do it. Good, Nana said, settling back into her pillows. Now go. Sterling and I have work to do. And Sophia, don't break character. Not even for a second. I drove back to my parents' house in a trance. It was past midnight when I pulled into the driveway. The Porsche was still there, gleaming under the security lights like a white beast. The house was dark except for the kitchen light. I walked inside. My mother was sitting at the island scrolling through her iPad. She had a glass of wine in her hand. She looked up as I entered, her face hardening instantly. I thought you went home, Linda said coldly. We don't have any leftovers if that is what you are looking for. I swallowed my pride. It tasted like acid. I forced my shoulders to slump. I forced my eyes to look down at the floor. I didn't go home, Mom, I said softly. I went for a drive. To clear my head. And she asked, not looking up from her screen. And I realized I was wrong. I lied. The words felt heavy on my tongue. I was emotional earlier. I shouldn't have caused a scene at the restaurant. I know you and Dad only want what is best for the family, and if selling the piano helps Jasmine, then I guess I should support that. Linda stopped scrolling. She slowly put down her wineglass. She swiveled her stool around to face me, a smug smile spreading across her face. Well, she said, letting out a long sigh. It took you long enough, but I am glad you finally came to your senses. I told your father you were just having one of your episodes. You know how you get when you are stressed about money? It makes you irrational. Yes, Mom, I whispered. I was irrational. Linda stood up and walked over to me. She didn't hug me. She just patted my shoulder, a gesture that felt more like she was petting a dog she tolerated than comforting a daughter. We forgive you, Sophia, she said benevolently. We are family after all. We don't hold grudges, but actions speak louder than words. What do you mean? I asked. Well, Linda said, her eyes gleaming with a new idea. Since you are so sorry and since you want to support your sister, we have a situation with the party this weekend. The party. Yes, Jasmine's car reveal party on Saturday. We invited about 50 people from the church and the club. Originally, we were going to hire a catering company, but Brad insisted on upgrading the rims on the Porsche to platinum ones, which cost an extra $8,000. So to balance the budget, we had to cut the catering. I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach. So Linda continued, smiling sweetly. Since you are such a good cook, and since you owe us an apology for ruining dinner tonight, I think it would be a lovely gesture if you handled the food. And the service. You want me to cater the party? I asked. And serve, Linda corrected. We need someone to pass the champagne and keep the appetizers flowing. It wouldn't look right if Jasmine did it. She is the guest of honor, and I certainly can't do it. I have to host. She waited, watching me closely, daring me to refuse. This was the test. If I fought back, the war was back on. If I agreed, they would think I was broken. I remembered Nana's voice. Let them dig the hole deep. I looked at my mother. I looked at the woman who sold my legacy and now wanted me to serve hors d'oeuvres to the people who would celebrate that theft. Okay, Mom, I said. I will do it. I will handle the food and the drinks. Linda clapped her hands together, delighted. Oh, wonderful. That is the spirit, Sophia. See, I knew you could be a team player. Now get some sleep. You have a lot of grocery shopping to do tomorrow. And don't buy the cheap stuff. We want to impress the neighbors. She turned off the kitchen light and walked upstairs, leaving me standing in the dark. I stood there for a moment listening to the silence of the house. A dark, twisted smile formed on my lips. She wanted me to serve fine. I would serve. I would serve them the best champagne. I would serve them the finest food. And when the moment was right, when everyone was watching, when they felt like kings and queens of the world, I would serve them the truth. I walked to the guest room, pulled out my phone, and sent a text to Nana. I am in. They want me to be the maid at the party. The stage is set. The reply came back instantly. Perfect. Make sure the champagne is cold. Revenge is a dish best served, chilled. The next 48 hours in my parents' house were a masterclass in gluttony. It was as if the sale of the piano had broken a dam, and a flood of repressed materialism came rushing out, drowning any sense of caution or decency. Nana Rose had told me to let them dig their hole, but I had not expected them to bring in an excavator. I watched it all happen from the sidelines, playing the role of the repentant daughter, the invisible servant, while keeping a mental ledger of every single cent they wasted. It started the very next morning at breakfast. Usually my father Marcus would be complaining about the price of eggs or lecturing us about conserving electricity. Today, however, he was sitting at the kitchen table with a glossy brochure spread out in front of him. He was humming a hymn which was always a sign that he was about to do something expensive. "Good morning, Sophia," he said cheerfully, not looking up. "I hope you slept well. Your mother and I have made a decision. Since the Lord has blessed us with this sudden windfall, it is time we elevate our standing in the community." Windfall. That was the word he used for selling his mother's soul. "What kind of decision, Dad?" I asked, pouring him coffee. "I just got off the phone with the membership director at the Royal Pines Country Club," he announced, tapping the brochure. "They have a limited number of platinum memberships opening up this month. It is exclusive. Senators play there, judges play there, and now the Brooks family will play there." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Royal Pines was notorious. It was the kind of place that had only started allowing black members in the 90s, and only the ones with old money. "That sounds nice, Dad," I said, forcing my voice to remain neutral. "How much is the initiation fee?" He waved his hand dismissively. "Oh, it is substantial. $50,000 up front plus monthly dues. But it is an investment, Sophia. Networking, access. It puts us in the room with the decision makers. I already wired the transfer. He had wired $50,000. Just like that. In one morning, he had blown more than I made in a year on a golf membership he wasn't even good enough to use. But that was just the appetizer. My mother Linda walked in a moment later looking like the cat that had swallowed the canary. She was holding her iPad showing me a listing for a beachfront condo. "Look at this, Sophia," she said, thrusting the screen into my face. "The Vista del Mar in Sarasota. 2 bedrooms, ocean view, marble floors throughout. We have always talked about a vacation home in Florida, haven't we?" "It is beautiful, Mom," I said. "It is perfect," she corrected. "And the market is moving so fast. I didn't want to lose it, so I put down a 10% deposit this morning. Non-refundable, of course, but who would want to refund this view? We are going to sign the papers next week." I did the math in my head. A condo like that in Sarasota easily went for $800,000. A 10% deposit was $80,000. Between the car, the golf club, and the condo deposit, they had already burned through nearly half of the piano money in less than 24 hours. They were spending with the reckless abandon of people who believed the well would never run dry. They truly believed that once Nana passed, millions more would flow into their accounts. I smiled at the picture of the condo. "It looks very peaceful, Mom. Nana would have loved the view." Linda's smile flickered for a second, but she recovered quickly. "Yes, well, Nana had her time. Now it is our time. And speaking of time, you need to get going on the grocery list for the party. Jasmine wants everything to be top tier." I spent the afternoon running errands, but the real show was happening on social media. Jasmine wasn't just enjoying her car, she was weaponizing it. I sat in the parking lot of the gourmet grocery store scrolling through her Instagram stories. The first clip was her posing in the driver's seat wearing oversized sunglasses. The caption read, "Hard work pays off. God is good. Hashtag self-made. Hashtag Porsche life." There was no mention of the piano, no mention of Nana Rose, no mention of the fact that the only hard work she had done was whining until she got her way. The next clip made my blood boil. Jasmine had driven the Porsche to a local coffee shop where we all used to hang out in high school. She had run into Tasha, a girl we grew up with who was now a nurse. Tasha drove a sensible Honda Civic, much like mine. In the video, Jasmine was holding the camera high, capturing both her pristine white Porsche and Tasha's dusty sedan in the background. "So good running into old friends," Jasmine chirped to the camera, panning over to Tasha, who looked uncomfortable. "Tasha, girl, you are still driving that little thing. You are brave. I don't think I could feel safe without my German engineering anymore." "Levels, you know." Tasha laughed awkwardly. "It gets me to work, Jasmine." Jasmine made a pouting face. "Ah, I love that for you. Humble beginnings. But hey, if you ever want to ride in a real car, let me know." I turned off my phone, my hands shaking with rage. She wasn't just celebrating, she was punching down. She was using my grandmother's legacy to belittle people who were actually contributing to society. I went into the store and started filling the cart with the most expensive items I could find. If they wanted a show, I would give them a show. Truffle oil, aged balsamic vinegar, imported cheeses, Wagyu beef sliders. I didn't look at the prices, I just threw them in. When I got to the checkout, the total came to nearly $2,000. I pulled out the family credit card my mother had given me, the one that was authorized to draw from the main account where the piano money sat. The cashier raised an eyebrow at the total. "Big party?" she asked. "You have no idea," I said, swiping the card. The machine beeped. Approved. Every beep of that machine felt like a shovel digging deeper into the earth. They were burying themselves transaction by transaction. When I got back to the house, the atmosphere was manic. My father was practicing his golf swing in the living room, dangerously close to a vase. My mother was on the phone with a decorator for the Florida condo. Jasmine was outside directing a photographer she had hired, probably with family money, to take professional shots of the car at sunset. "Hey, Sophia," Jasmine yelled as I hauled heavy bags of groceries into the house. "Don't forget to wash the champagne glasses by hand. I don't want any water spots on them. It looks tacky." I paused in the doorway, a bag of charcoal in my arms. "Sure, Jasmine," I said, my voice dripping with forced sweetness. "No water spots. Only the best for you." She didn't even look at me. She just flipped her hair and turned back to the photographer. "Make sure you get the logo on the wheel. I want people to know it is the Turbo GT, not the base model." I walked into the kitchen and started unpacking. As I arranged the expensive cheeses and prepped the meat, I felt a strange sense of detachment. The pain of losing the piano was still there, a dull ache in my chest, but it was being replaced by a cold, hard anticipation. I looked at the calendar on the fridge. Saturday. The party. The deadline. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Nana. "How is the patient?" she asked, referring to the family. I typed back quickly. "Feverish, spending like kings, golf membership, condo deposit, and enough ego to fill a stadium." Nana's reply came a few seconds later. "Good. The higher they climb, the harder the fall. Sterling has the papers ready. Keep smiling, Sophia." The curtain rises soon. I put the phone away and picked up a silver platter. I began to polish it, rubbing away the tarnish until I could see my own reflection. I didn't look like a victim anymore. I looked like a shark circling the water. "Mom," I called out to the living room. "Do we have enough ice for the champagne bucket?" My mother wandered in, looking at her nails. "Oh, just order some, Sophia. Don't bother me with details. I am busy visualizing the furniture layout for the vacation home." I smiled. "No problem, Mom. I will handle it." I handled everything. I prepped the food. I cleaned the house. I let them treat me like the help. I let them believe that I had accepted my place at the bottom of the food chain. Because I knew something they didn't. I knew that the condo deposit was non-refundable. I knew that the golf membership had a no cancellation clause. I knew that the Porsche was now a depreciating asset tied to a crime. They were building a castle on a foundation of quicksand, and on Saturday I was going to be the one to pull the plug. As I watched my father toast to his imaginary future in the country club, I quietly poured myself a glass of tap water. Enjoy it, Dad, I thought. Drink up. Because the hangover is going to be legendary. 2 days before the main event, the car reveal party that would serve as the stage for my family's destruction, we were summoned to a dinner at Brad's parents' house in Buckhead. If my parents were trying to buy their way into the upper class, Brad's family was the gatekeeper. The Remingtons lived in a sprawling estate that looked more like a government building than a home with limestone columns and a driveway long enough to land a small plane. I arrived in my Honda parking it far away from the entrance as instructed by a text from Jasmine earlier that day. She didn't want my sensible sedan ruining the aesthetic of the driveway, where her Porsche was currently being admired by Brad's father. Walking into the Remington estate was like walking into a freezer. The air conditioning was set to a temperature that felt hostile, and the floors were made of a marble so polished it looked like ice. Brad's mother, Eleanor, was waiting in the foyer. She was a woman who looked like she had been preserved in hairspray and old money. She had never liked me. To her, I was the boring sister, the one without the sparkle. She tolerated Jasmine because Jasmine was malleable. Jasmine could be trained to be a trophy wife. I, on the other hand, had opinions. "Hello, Eleanor," I said, offering a polite smile. "Thank you for having us." Eleanor looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my off-the-rack dress. It was a simple navy sheath, professional and modest, but in this house simplicity was a sin. "Hello, Sophia," she said, her voice thin and airy. "You look so comfortable. I always admire how you prioritize utility over fashion. It is very brave." It was a backhanded compliment wrapped in silk, but I just nodded. "Thank you." We moved into the parlor for cocktails. My parents were already there holding crystal glasses of scotch, laughing too loudly at a joke Brad's father, Richard, had just made. They looked desperate to belong. My father, Marcus, was leaning forward, nodding eagerly at everything Richard said, mimicking his posture. It was pathetic. They were performing a dance of submission, hoping that if they smiled wide enough, the Remingtons would forget that our family money was new and, in this specific case, stolen. Jasmine was the center of attention. She was wearing a dress that probably cost $3,000, funded by the piano sale, and she was draped across the arm of Brad's chair. "Jasmine, darling," Eleanor cooed, sitting down opposite them. "I was just telling Richard how much that car suits you. It really elevates your presence. You know, not everyone can carry off a vehicle like that. It requires a certain air." Jasmine beamed, sipping her champagne. "Thank you, Eleanor. I just feel like it represents who I am becoming. You know I want to project success." "Exactly," Eleanor agreed. "You have a natural instinct for quality, unlike some people who are content with mediocrity." Her eyes flickered to me for a nanosecond before returning to Jasmine. I took a sip of my water. I wasn't drinking alcohol tonight. I needed to be razor sharp. Dinner was served in a dining room that felt like a courtroom. The table was long mahogany, and we were spaced out so far that you almost had to shout to be heard. I was seated at the far end, naturally next to a silent cousin of Brad's, who spent the entire meal texting under the table. As the second course was served, a delicate lobster bisque, Brad decided it was time to perform for his audience. He had been drinking steadily since I arrived, and his cheeks were flushed with wine and arrogance. "You know, Dad," Brad said, his voice booming across the table, "we almost didn't get the car. We had a little bit of a cash flow issue with the down payment initially." Richard Remington raised an eyebrow. "Is that so? I thought Marcus had handled the financials." "Oh, he did?" Brad said, quickly grinning. "But we had to liquidate some old assets first. You wouldn't believe the drama we had to deal with." My stomach tightened. I knew what was coming. "Tell them, Jasmine," Brad urged. "Tell them about the piano." Jasmine giggled, covering her mouth with her napkin. "Oh my God, it was so ridiculous. So Nana Rose had this old, rotting piano in the living room. It was literally falling apart. Termites dust the works. And Sophia here threw a total fit when we decided to sell it. Eleanor looked at me, a look of amused pity on her face. A fit? Over an old piano, Brad laughed, cutting into his steak. A fit is an understatement, Mom. She acted like we were selling the crown jewels. She actually tried to claim it was valuable. Can you imagine she is holding onto this piece of junk crying about sentimental value while we are trying to make a smart financial move for the family's future? My father Marcus chimed in, eager to align himself with the Remingtons. Sophia has always been a bit backward-looking. She has trouble letting go of the past. She doesn't understand that you have to clear out the old to make room for the new. It is a scarcity mindset, Brad declared, pointing his fork at me. That is what it is. Sophia has a poverty mindset. She is afraid to spend money. She is afraid to upgrade. She wants to hoard old things because she doesn't believe she deserves new things. It is sad, really. The table went quiet. The words poverty mindset hung in the air like a foul smell. I looked at Brad. He was smiling, confident that he had just delivered a profound psychological analysis. He was lecturing me about poverty while sitting in a chair his grandfather bought, wearing a suit, his trust fund paid for, talking about a car bought with money stolen from my grandmother. My hands were clenched so tight in my lap that my fingernails were cutting into my palms. I could feel the skin breaking. I could feel the warm sting of blood. Every fiber of my being wanted to stand up. I wanted to flip the table. I wanted to scream that I was the only person at this table who had actually earned a paycheck. I wanted to tell them that the rotting piano was worth more than Brad's entire ego. But I looked at my mother. She was watching me, her eyes warning me to behave. She was terrified I would embarrass them. I took a deep breath. I uncurled my fingers, feeling the sting. I picked up my water glass. I didn't say anything. I didn't defend myself. I didn't argue about the value of the piano. I just smiled, a small, tight, pathetic little smile. "You are probably right, Brad," I said softly. My voice sounded foreign to my own ears. "I guess I just get attached to things. I am working on it." Eleanor sighed, shaking her head. "Well, at least you admit it, Sophia. The first step to recovery is admitting you have a problem. You should look at your sister. Learn from her. She knows how to embrace abundance." "Yes," I said, looking at Jasmine. "She certainly does." The conversation moved on. They started talking about summer plans in the Hamptons and the new yacht Richard was considering. I was forgotten. I was just the poor relation with the poverty mindset, the cautionary tale at the end of the table. I stared at my lobster bisque, watching the steam rise. Poverty mindset. I rolled the words around in my mind. They thought I was poor because I was quiet. They thought I was poor because I was ethical. They had no idea that in less than 48 hours the poverty would be theirs. Real, grinding, humiliating poverty. Not a mindset. A reality. I looked at Brad one last time. He was laughing at something his father said, his head thrown back, his throat exposed. Keep laughing, Brad, I thought. Enjoy the champagne, because the bill is coming due and you are not going to be able to pay it. Under the table, I wiped my bleeding palm on the napkin. The red stain blossomed on the white fabric hidden from view. It was the only blood I would shed in this war. The rest would be theirs. The morning after the dinner at the Remingtons, I woke up with a headache that had nothing to do with alcohol and everything to do with repressed rage. My hand was throbbing where I had dug my nails into my palm, a physical reminder of the silence I had forced upon myself. I was just pouring my second cup of coffee when my phone buzzed. It was not a text from my mother demanding servitude, nor was it a taunt from Jasmine. It was a call from a private number. I answered it, my voice raspy from a restless sleep. "Hello, Miss Brooks. This is Arthur Sterling." The lawyer's voice was crisp, cutting through the morning fog like a scalpel. My heart jumped into my throat. Sterling never called me directly. He usually communicated through Nana or via encrypted text messages to avoid detection. Mr. Sterling, I said, straightening up, as if he could see me through the phone. Is Nana okay? Rose is stable, he said. She is resting comfortably and saving her energy for Saturday. However, I am not calling about her health. I am calling because my forensic accountant has finished reviewing the transaction history regarding the Steinway. You need to come to my office immediately. Now I asked, looking at the clock. It was 8:15 in the morning. I have to be at my parents' house by 10 to prep for the party. Make an excuse, Sterling ordered. This cannot wait. What I have found changes the complexion of this entire situation. It is no longer just a civil dispute, Sophia. We are looking at something much darker. I drove to downtown Atlanta with a sense of dread pooling in my stomach. Sterling's office was located in a glass tower that pierced the sky, a fortress of wealth and power that made my parents' country club look like a playground. I took the elevator to the 42nd floor, my reflection in the polished steel doors, looking pale and small. Sterling was waiting for me. He didn't offer me coffee. He didn't ask about the weather. He gestured for me to sit in the leather chair opposite his massive mahogany desk. On the desk sat a single file folder. It was red. Open it, he said. I reached out my fingers, trembling slightly. I opened the folder. Inside was a photocopy of a legal document. At the top, in bold letters, it read, Limited Power of Attorney. I scanned the document. It was dated 3 weeks ago, right around the time I was in Chicago for the appraisal conference. The document granted my father, Marcus Brooks, the legal authority to manage, sell, and liquidate personal property belonging to Sophia Brooks, specifically listing musical instruments and household heirlooms. I frowned. I never signed this, I said, looking up at Sterling. I never gave my father power of attorney. I am 29 years old and perfectly sound of mind. Why would I give him this? Keep reading. Sterling said, his voice devoid of emotion. Look at the bottom of page 2. I flipped the page. There on the signature line was my name. Sophia Marie Brooks. I stared at it. The ink looked black and confident. The loops of the S were sweeping, the B in Brooks was sharp. It looked remarkably like my signature. In fact, to an untrained eye, it was my signature. But I am an appraiser. My job is to spot fakes. My job is to look at the brush strokes of a painting or the grain of wood and determine if it is authentic. I looked closer. The pressure was wrong. The dot on the I was a circle, something I hadn't done since middle school. And there was a slight hesitation mark at the end of the first name where the pen had lingered too long, as if the writer was checking a reference. This is a forgery, I whispered. It is a very good one, Sterling admitted. But yes, it is a forgery. My handwriting expert confirmed it within 10 minutes. But look at the witness line, Sophia. Look who notarized it. My eyes drifted to the notary stamp and the signature beside it. Deacon Miller. I felt the air leave my lungs. Deacon Miller was my father's best friend. He was a pillar of our church. He had held me when I was a baby. He had given me a Bible for my graduation. They got the deacon to notarize a fake signature, I asked, my voice barely audible. Sterling leaned back in his chair, tenting his fingers. It appears so. Your parents didn't just sell the piano behind your back, Sophia. They knew that because the piano was legally gifted to you 5 years ago, they couldn't sell it without your permission. The bill of sale would have been invalid. The buyer, Mr. Vanderbilt, is a reputable collector. He never would have purchased a $500,000 instrument without a clear chain of title. So they created one, I said, realizing the horror of it. Exactly. They created a fraudulent legal instrument claiming you had authorized the sale. They forged your signature and they used their church connection to get it notarized illegally. They then used this document to convince Vanderbilt that they had the right to accept the wire transfer. Sterling leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine. Sophia, listened to me closely. This is not just a family betrayal anymore. This is not just mom and dad being mean. This is wire fraud. This is identity theft. This is forgery of a legal document. These are federal crimes. If we take this to the district attorney, your parents aren't just looking at losing the money. They are looking at 5 to 10 years in federal prison, and Deacon Miller would lose his license and likely face jail time as well. I sat back in the chair feeling dizzy. Prison. My parents in prison. I thought about the dinner last night. I thought about Brad calling me poor. I thought about my mother telling me to wash the champagne glasses. They were walking around eating lobster-driving Porsches, acting like royalty, all while sitting on a foundation of felonies they had committed against their own daughter. They didn't just steal the piano, I said, my voice shaking with a mix of grief and fury. They stole my identity. They impersonated me. They treated you as a non-entity, Sterling corrected. To them, you are not a person with rights. You are an obstacle to their desires. They didn't think twice about forging your name, because in their minds you don't own anything. Everything you have belongs to them because they gave birth to you. It is the ultimate narcissism. He tapped the red folder. This is the nuclear option, Sophia. Nana Rose knows about this. When I showed her the findings this morning, she didn't cry. She asked me to give you the choice. The choice. Sterling nodded. We can stop this now. We can call your parents, show them this folder, and demand the money back. They will be ruined financially. Yes, but they might stay out of jail if they make full restitution immediately. Or we proceed with the plan for Saturday. We let them host the party. We let them stand in front of their friends and neighbors. And then we drop the hammer. But if we do that, if we expose this publicly, the authorities will get involved. There will be no saving them from the consequences. The room was silent. I could hear the hum of the air conditioning and the distant traffic of Atlanta far below. I closed my eyes. I pictured my mother's face when she told me the piano was termite-infested. I pictured my father's smug smile as he talked about the country club. I pictured Jasmine laughing as she drove the car paid for with my name. They had ample opportunity to tell me the truth. When I asked where the piano was, they could have confessed. When I cried at the restaurant, they could have apologized. Even now they could come to me. But they hadn't. They had doubled down. They had dragged me to Brad's parents' house to be humiliated. They were making me serve food at their celebration. They didn't care if I was hurt. They only cared if I was quiet. I opened my eyes. I looked at the forged signature one more time. It looked like a violation. It looked like they had reached inside me and taken the one thing that was truly mine, my name, and used it to buy a status symbol. Proceed, I said. Sterling raised an eyebrow. Are you sure? Once we ring this bell, it cannot be unrung. I am sure, I said, my voice hardening into steel. They made their choice when they picked up that pen. They decided I wasn't a daughter, but a resource to be exploited. If they want to play criminals, Mr. Sterling, then let us treat them like criminals. Sterling closed the folder with a final heavy thud. Very well, he said. I will finalize the affidavits. I have already contacted the fraud division at the bank to freeze the transfer, but I put a hold on the notification so they won't know the money is gone until Monday morning. They will have a lovely weekend of ignorance. He stood up and extended his hand. You are a brave woman, Sophia. Your grandmother is very proud of you. I stood up and shook his hand. I didn't feel brave. I felt cold. I felt like the daughter who had walked into this building was dead, and someone else was walking out, someone capable of watching her parents burn. I am not brave, I said. I am just done being the victim. I left the office and got back into my Honda. I checked the time. It was 9:30. I had 30 minutes to get to my parents' house to start prepping the appetizers. I looked at my reflection in the rear-view mirror. My eyes looked different, darker, older. I started the engine. Time to go make the canapés, I whispered to myself. I drove toward the suburbs. The red folder's image burned into my mind. Every mile I drove, the guilt I had felt about ruining their reputation evaporated. They had committed a felony. They had risked my credit, my legal standing, and my future, all for a car. When I pulled into the driveway, Jasmine was outside yelling at the landscapers to cut the grass shorter. Missed a spot. She screeched, pointing a manicured finger at a patch of green. I parked my car. I took a deep breath. I put on my mask of the obedient sister. "Hey, Jasmine," I called out, forcing a cheerful wave. "I am here." I picked up the extra ice. Jasmine turned to me, looking annoyed. "You are late, Sophia. Mom is freaking out about the napkins. Get inside and start folding." I walked past her, past the Porsche, past the lies. "On it," I said. I walked into the house ready to fold the napkins. I would fold them perfectly. I would make them look like little white flags of surrender. Because I knew that in 48 hours, this entire house would be a crime scene. And I would be the only one walking away with clean hands. The phone rang at 2 in the afternoon on Friday. It was the call I had been expecting, the one Nana Rose and Sterling had scripted to perfection, but my heart still hammered against my ribs when I saw the caller ID. It was Dr. Evans, the hospice director, who was fully aware of the situation and had agreed to help Nana expose the truth. I answered on the first ring, putting it on speakerphone as I stood in the kitchen folding the linen napkins for the party. My mother was nearby arranging flowers, and Jasmine was on the couch editing a video of her steering wheel. "Hello, Dr. Evans," I said, my voice trembling with feigned anxiety. "Is everything okay?" "I am afraid there has been a significant decline," Dr. Evans said, his voice grave and professional. "Her vitals are dropping rapidly. I believe we are entering the final stages. If the family wishes to say goodbye, you should come now." The reaction in the room was immediate, but it was not the reaction of a loving family losing a matriarch. It was the reaction of investors hearing the opening bell of the stock market. My mother dropped the flowers not in shock, but in a flurry of logistical panic. "Oh my God," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "It is happening. Marcus, get the keys." My father ran in from the garage. "Is it time?" he asked, his eyes wide. "It is time," Linda confirmed, grabbing her purse. "She is transitioning. We need to go. Jasmine, get your shoes." Jasmine didn't cry. She didn't ask if Nana was in pain. She just looked up from her phone and said, "Okay, but should we take the Porsche?" It would be a weird vibe for a hospice parking lot, right? Maybe we should take the Lexus. It looks more somber. "We are taking the Lexus," my father snapped. "Hurry up. We need to be there before she passes. We need to be the ones holding her hand when she goes. It looks better for the probate court." I felt a wave of nausea so strong I almost threw up on the napkins. It looks better for the probate court. That was their priority. We piled into the car. I sat in the back next to Jasmine, who spent the entire drive checking her makeup in a compact mirror. "Do I look too pale?" she asked me. "I want to look sad, but not like ugly sad. I might have to post a tribute later." "You look appropriate, Jasmine," I said, staring out the window to avoid slapping her. When we arrived at the Golden Horizon Hospice, the atmosphere was heavy. Dr. Evans met us at the entrance and led us to Nana's room. The lights were dimmed low. The rhythm of the machines was slow and irregular. Nana Rose lay in the bed, her eyes closed, her breathing shallow and raspy. She looked for all the world like a woman in her final hour. "She keeps drifting in and out," Dr. Evans whispered. "She may not be able to hear you, but you can speak to her." My mother immediately rushed to the bedside, grabbing Nana's limp hand. "Oh, Mama," she wailed, her voice pitching up into a theatrical sob. "We are here. Linda is here. You can let go now. We will take care of everything." My father stood at the foot of the bed, looking at the monitors with a calculating expression. He didn't look at his mother's face. He looked at the heart rate line. "Dr. Evans?" my father said, keeping his voice low. "Realistically, how long do we have?" "Hours, minutes." "It is hard to say." "Mr. Brooks," the doctor replied. "Could be any time." "Right." My father nodded, checking his watch. "The reason I ask is that we have a very important memorial service to plan, and there are certain legal documents that need to be filed with the county clerk. If she passes after 5 p.m. on a Friday, we can't get the death certificate until Monday. That delays the reading of the will by a full week." I stood in the corner, pressing my back against the wall. He was worried about the weekend closing hours of the county clerk office, while his mother lay dying in front of him. Dr. Evans looked at me briefly, a flicker of disgust in his eyes that he quickly masked. "I understand," the doctor said. "Nature takes its own course, Mr. Brooks." Jasmine sighed loudly, shifting her weight. "My feet hurt in these heels. Sophia, go get us some coffee. This is going to be a long night." "Yes," my mother added, not looking up from her performance of grief. "Go to the cafeteria, Sophia. Get lattes for everyone, and a bottle of water for your father." This was my cue. I was being dismissed so the adults could talk business. "Okay," I said softly. "I will be right back." I walked out of the room, my shoes clicking softly on the linoleum. I walked down the hall, turned the corner, and stopped. I didn't go to the cafeteria. Instead, I pulled my phone out of my pocket and put in my earbuds. Earlier that morning, Sterling had installed a small, inconspicuous baby monitor camera on the bookshelf facing the bed. It was hidden inside a hollowed-out book spine. I opened the app on my phone, and the live feed popped up. The audio was crystal clear. I leaned against the wall of the waiting area, watching my family on the small screen. As soon as the door clicked shut behind me, the dynamic in the room changed instantly. My mother stopped wailing. She dropped Nana's hand as if it were a dead fish and stood up, smoothing her dress. "Is she gone?" Linda asked, looking at the doctor. "Not yet," Dr. Evans said. "I will give you some privacy." The doctor left the room. Now it was just the four of them. My parents, Jasmine and Brad, who had just arrived and slipped in the door. My father exhaled loudly. Finally. I thought she would hang on for another month. The medical bills alone were eating into the estate. Brad walked over to Jasmine and wrapped an arm around her waist. "How are you holding up, babe?" he asked. "I am stressed, Brad," Jasmine whispered. But the microphone picked it up clearly. "Look at her. She is still breathing. If she doesn't go this weekend, we are in trouble." "What kind of trouble?" my mother asked sharply. "Money trouble," Jasmine hissed. "Brad just got the notification from the bank. The first payment for the Porsche is due in 15 days. And the insurance. And we put the deposit down on the venue for the reveal party." So Linda said, "We have the piano money." "No, Mom, we don't," Jasmine said, her voice rising in panic. "You spent $80,000 on the condo deposit. Dad sent $50,000 to the golf club. We paid off your credit cards. We bought the furniture. Brad did the math this morning. We have maybe $12,000 left in the liquid account." My father swore quietly. "Only 12,000. How did we go through 400,000 that fast?" "It goes fast when you buy rims that cost $8,000, Brad muttered. "Look, it doesn't matter. As soon as the old lady flatlines, the trust unlocks. The portfolio is worth 15 million. 12,000 or 12 million, it is all the same pot. We just need the bridge loan to cover us until the will is read." "But what if the will is delayed?" Jasmine whined. "What if Sophia finds out we spent all the cash? She thinks we only got a few thousand for the piano. If she sees the bank statements before the inheritance comes through, she is going to ask questions." "She won't see anything," my father said firmly. "I have power of attorney. I control the narrative. Sophia is an idiot. She folded napkins all morning without a peep. She is broken. She accepts her place." My mother looked down at Nana's face. "Just let go, old woman," Linda whispered to her own mother. "You have had a long life. Stop being stubborn and let us have our turn. You don't need the money where you are going." I watched on the screen as my mother adjusted her pearls, looking at her dying mother with nothing but impatience. "We need that inheritance by Monday," Marcus, Linda said. "I can't lose that condo in Florida. If we default on the deposit, we lose the 80 grand. "We won't lose it," Marcus assured her. "She is weak. She can't last the night. Once she is gone, I will call Sterling first thing Saturday morning and demand an emergency reading of the will. We will be popping champagne in Sarasota by next weekend." Brad laughed. "Cheers to that." I took the earbuds out. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. I was shaking from the sheer toxicity I had just ingested. They were broke. They had burned through nearly $500,000 in less than a week on deposits and vanity projects, banking entirely on Nana's death to bail them out. They were leveraging a future that didn't exist. I looked down the hallway toward the room. I wanted to storm in there, I wanted to scream. But I remembered the plan. Saturday. Tomorrow. Tomorrow was the party. Tomorrow all their friends would be there. Tomorrow the Porsche would be unveiled. And tomorrow they would find out that the trust hadn't just been locked, it had been weaponized. I walked toward the cafeteria to buy the lattes. I would bring them their coffee. I would let them stay awake. I wanted them alert. I wanted them to have full energy for the devastation that was coming. As I waited for the barista to steam the milk, I sent a text to Sterling. They confessed. They are out of money. They are banking on the inheritance to cover the debts they created this week. Proceed with the final phase. Sterling replied with a single thumbs-up emoji. I carried the tray of coffees back to the room wearing my mask of the dutiful, stupid daughter. When I entered, my mother was back to holding Nana's hand, wiping a fake tear from her cheek. "Thank you, Sophia," she sniffled. "Put it on the table. We are just praying for her peace." I put the coffee down. "I am praying too, Mom," I said. And I meant it. I was praying for the sun to rise on Saturday, because the peace they were about to find was the peace of total ruin. I walked back into the hospice room with the cardboard tray of lattes, the steam rising against my chin. The hallway was quiet, but inside room 304, the silence had been replaced by the sticky, rhythmic sound of peeling paper. I stopped in the doorway, the tray trembling slightly in my hands. The scene before me was so grotesque, so devoid of basic human decency, that for a moment my brain refused to process it. My mother Linda was moving around the room with a pad of bright yellow post-it notes. She wasn't holding Nana's hand. She wasn't reading scripture. She was pricing the inventory. She peeled off a yellow square and slapped it onto the base of the antique Tiffany lamp on the bedside table. On the note in her sharp, angular handwriting, she had written Linda. She moved to the leather armchair in the corner. Slap. Another note. Living room set. She moved to the small jewelry box on the dresser, the one that held the pearls Nana wore for her 40th anniversary. Slap. Jasmine. I stood there, the coffee turning cold, watching my mother label her dying mother's possessions like items at a yard sale. My father was sitting on the window ledge, tapping furiously on his calculator app, muttering numbers under his breath. Jasmine was scrolling through Zillow on her phone, looking bored. "Mom," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "What are you doing?" Linda jumped slightly, then smoothed her dress, her face arranging itself into a mask of practicality. "Oh, you are back," she said, taking a latte from the tray without saying thank you. "I am just getting a head start, Sophia. You know how chaotic things get after the funeral. People come out of the woodwork claiming things. Cousins, distant aunts. It is important to stake our claim now so there is no confusion later. It is what Nana would have wanted." Order. Nana would have wanted you to hold her hand, I thought, but I didn't say it. I handed a coffee to my father. "You would kick me out on the street to pay for a vacation home." "We are not kicking you out," Linda said, peeling off another sticky note and slapping it onto the Bible on the nightstand. "We are consolidating assets. You can stay in the basement for a few months until you find a husband or get a better job. Honestly, it is time you stopped leeching off your grandmother anyway. It is enabling your mediocrity. Leeching. I paid the HOA fees. I paid the taxes. I paid for the maintenance. Nana provided the walls, but I made it a home, and now they were planning to sell it out from under me before her heart had even stopped beating. "We can call the realtor on Monday morning," Marcus said, nodding decisively. "If we list it below market value for a quick cash sale, we can have the money in 10 days. That solves the liquidity problem." Brad smirked at me. "See, Sophia. Problem solved. You should be happy. You are finally contributing to the family wealth." I looked at Nana Rose. Her face was pale, her breathing rhythmic and shallow. She looked peaceful, but I just knew that behind those closed eyelids, a fire was raging. She was hearing every word. She was hearing her son plan to make her favorite granddaughter homeless. I took a deep breath, swallowing the scream that was clawing its way up my throat. I had to stay in character. I had to be the beaten dog. Okay, I whispered, letting my shoulders slump. If that is what you decide, I can pack my things next week. Good girl, Linda said, not even looking at me. Now move out of the way. I need to tag that clock on the wall. I think it is an antique. I stepped back, pressing myself against the cold wall. I watched them. I watched my mother tag the clock. I watched my father calculate his millions. I watched Jasmine browse for furniture for a house she hadn't bought yet. They were monsters. There was no other word for it. I went to the bathroom, locked the door, and sank to the floor. I checked the recording. It was perfect. I sent a copy to Sterling. Add the condo to the list, I typed. They are coming for my home. Sterling replied instantly. The eviction notice is already drafted, but not for you. I stood up, washed my face, and looked at myself in the mirror. They wanted to take my home. They wanted to take my dignity. Tomorrow at the party, I would take everything. I unlocked the door and walked back into the hallway, ready to play the final act. The drive back from the hospice was silent, but the moment we stepped through the front door of my parents' house, the atmosphere shifted from solemn performance to celebratory anticipation. It was Friday night. According to my father's calculations, Nana Rose would likely pass within the next 12 hours, meaning the inheritance was practically sitting in their bank accounts. They decided that a pre-funeral strategy meeting was in order, which was just a polite way of saying they wanted to drink expensive wine and divide up the spoils of war before the war was even over. I went straight to the kitchen to arrange the charcuterie board I had prepped earlier. As I sliced the prosciutto and arranged the imported figs, I could hear them in the living room. They weren't praying. They weren't sharing fond memories of the woman who had raised my father. They were arguing over vacation schedules for the Florida condo they hadn't even bought yet. I want the week of July 4th, Jasmine announced loudly. Brad and I want to host a white party on the beach. It is going to be iconic. You can have July. Linda replied, her voice slurring slightly from the wine she had started drinking in the car. But your father and I want Christmas. We are going to redo the entire living room down there. That tacky wicker furniture has to go. I walked into the living room carrying the heavy wooden board. My father was sitting in Nana's favorite armchair, the one she used to knit in. He looked too big for it, his presence violating the memory of her small, comforting frame. He was holding a file folder. Another one. Ah, Sophia, he said, gesturing for me to set the food down on the coffee table. Good timing. Put that down and take a seat. We need to handle some housekeeping. I placed the tray down next to Jasmine's feet, which were propped up on the table in her designer heels. I sat on the ottoman, the lowest seat in the room, keeping my hands folded in my lap. What is it, Dad? I asked. Marcus opened the folder and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It wasn't a complex legal document like the ones Sterling produced. It looked like something he had typed up himself on his laptop, probably while I was getting coffee at the hospital. Since we are entering a new chapter for this family, he began using his church voice, the one he used to solicit donations. We need to ensure that there is no confusion regarding the distribution of assets. Your mother and I want to be fair, but we also need to be realistic about everyone's contributions and needs. He slid the paper across the table toward me. I picked it up. The title read, Family Asset Harmony Agreement. I scanned the paragraphs. The legalese was amateur, but the intent was crystal clear. It stated that I, Sophia Brooks, acknowledged that I had received significant financial support from the family over the years, a lie, and that I hereby waived any and all claims to the estate of Rose Sterling, including real estate, liquid assets, and personal property. In exchange for this waiver, the document said the family agreed to transfer the full title of the 2018 Honda Civic to my name. I stared at the paper. The Honda. My car. The car I had made every single payment on for 5 years. The only reason it was in my father's name was that when I bought it right out of college, I needed a cosigner to get a better interest rate. I had paid off the loan 2 months ago. It was my car. You want me to sign away my inheritance in exchange for my own car? I asked, looking up at him. It is not your car, Sophia, my mother interjected, spearing a piece of cheese. Your father's name is on the title. Technically, it is a family asset. We could sell it tomorrow if we wanted to. And honestly, with the cash flow issues we mentioned, selling it would bring in a quick 15,000. That would cover the catering for the funeral. I felt a chill run down my spine. They were threatening to sell the car I used to get to work. They were threatening to leave me stranded unless I signed away my rights to an estate worth $15 million. This is generous, Sophia, my father said, leaning forward. Think about it. They forced me to sign a waiver under threat of taking my car and charging back rent. Another piece of evidence for the coercion file. Sterling's reply came 3 minutes later. Received. This proves intent to defraud and undue influence. They just handed us the final nail. Get some rest, Sophia. Tomorrow the hammer falls. I put the phone away. I finished the dishes. I wiped down the counters. I went upstairs to the guest room, the room that used to be mine before I was deemed not good enough. I lay down on the bed, staring at the ceiling. They thought I had signed away my future. They didn't realize I had just signed their death warrant. Tomorrow was the reveal party, the Porsche, the friends, the bragging, and me. The obedient daughter with the champagne tray. I closed my eyes and finally, for the first time in a week, I slept peacefully. I slept the sleep of a woman who knows exactly where the bodies are buried and who has the shovel ready to dig them up. Saturday morning arrived with a sky so blue it felt like a mockery of the storm that was brewing inside my parents' house. The air was thick with the smell of floor wax and desperation. My mother had been up since 5 in the morning manicuring the already perfect living room, moving vases a fraction of an inch to the left, then moving them back. She was humming a gospel tune, but there was nothing holy about her energy. It was the frantic energy of a woman trying to manifest wealth through sheer force of will. I was in the kitchen arranging the gold napkins my mother had demanded. My hands moved mechanically, folding the crisp paper into elaborate swans, but my mind was miles away, visualizing the file folder currently sitting in the trunk of my Honda. The house was dressed for a celebration, but I knew it was actually dressed for an execution. At 9 o'clock sharp, the silence of the kitchen was shattered by the ringtone of my father's cell phone. It was the generic loud marimba sound he kept at maximum volume so he would never miss a business opportunity. Marcus froze mid-sip of his coffee. He looked at the screen and his eyes widened. "It is Sterling," he whispered the name, sucking the air out of the room. My mother dropped the throw pillow she was fluffing. "Put it on speaker," she hissed. Marcus tapped the screen and set the phone on the granite island. We all gathered around it like it was a sacred altar. Mr. Brooks Sterling's voice filled the room. It was calm, detached, and utterly unreadable. "Yes, Mr. Sterling," my father answered, his voice cracking slightly. "We are all here. Has there been a development?" "There has," Sterling said. "I am calling to inform you that Rose has experienced a sudden and significant change in her condition this morning. She is awake, she is fully lucid, and she has requested an immediate family gathering." My mother gasped, clutching her chest. Is she saying goodbye?" "She is saying many things," Mrs. Brooks Sterling replied cryptically. "But her primary concern is the estate. She insists on finalizing the distribution of assets today before her strength fails her again. She was quite specific. She wants to sign the transfer papers in person with all beneficiaries present." My father's face broke into a grin so wide it looked painful. Transfer papers, that was the magic word. "We will be there immediately," Marcus said, practically vibrating with excitement. "We can be there in 20 minutes. "Excellent," Sterling said. "Please bring everyone, including Sophia." Rose was adamant that the entire family be present for this announcement. "Of course," Marcus said. "We are leaving now." The line went dead. For a split second there was silence. Then the kitchen erupted. "Yes," my father shouted, pumping his fist in the air like he had just won the Super Bowl. Did you hear that transfer papers? She is signing it over. It is a symbol of the family legacy. Let's go. Linda, grab your purse. They started moving toward the door, a whirlwind of greed and expensive cologne. They were so high on the fumes of imaginary money that they didn't even look at me. I stood by the island watching them. They looked like vultures in designer clothes rushing to pick the bones of a carcass that wasn't even dead yet. Aren't you coming? Sophia? My mother called out over her shoulder, her hand already on the door handle. I looked at the gold napkin in my hand. I crushed it. I will meet you there, I said quietly. The Porsche only seats 4 comfortably, and I have some things I need to bring. Whatever Jasmine yelled from the driveway. Just don't be late. We need you to witness the signatures. I heard the roar of the Porsche's engine, a deep, aggressive growl that shook the window panes. Then the sound of tires peeling out on the asphalt, as Jasmine accelerated down the street, eager to claim a fortune that had already been lost. The house fell silent again. I didn't rush. I walked calmly to the sink and drank a glass of water. I washed my hands. I walked to the front door and locked it behind me. I walked to my Honda Civic, the car they had threatened to take away from me, the car they despised. I opened the trunk. Inside, nestled in a nondescript tote bag, was the red folder Sterling had given me. Next to it was the original receipt for the Steinway piano. And next to that was my phone containing the audio recordings of them plotting to evict me and the video of them celebrating the forgery. I wasn't bringing a waiver. I wasn't bringing forgiveness. I was bringing the apocalypse. I got into the driver's seat and started the engine. It didn't roar like the Porsche. It hummed reliably. I backed out of the driveway, taking one last look at the house. The lawn was perfectly manicured. The windows were gleaming. It looked like the home of a respectable, loving family. It was a lie. And in less than an hour, everyone would know it. I drove toward the hospital, keeping a steady pace. I didn't need to speed. The trap was already set. The bait had been taken. As I merged onto the highway, I imagined them in the Porsche. I imagined them laughing, talking about beach houses and platinum rims. I imagined my father calculating his net worth. I imagined my mother planning her wardrobe for the funeral. They thought they were driving toward a payday. They had no idea they were driving straight into a buzzsaw. I turned on the radio. A jazz song was playing. It was a piano solo. I smiled. I am coming, Nana, I whispered, and I am bringing the receipts. The VIP suite at Golden Horizon did not look like a place for dying. It looked like a place for closing deals. When I arrived, the door was already open, and the air inside was charged with a strange electric tension. My family was already there, clustered in the center of the room like a flock of well-dressed vultures. Jasmine was checking her reflection in the glass of a framed painting, while my father Marcus was pacing back and forth, checking his watch every 10 seconds. My mother Linda was sitting on the edge of the guest sofa, clutching her purse as if it contained the keys to the kingdom. I stood in the doorway, my tote bag heavy on my shoulder. They didn't notice me. Their eyes were fixed on the far side of the room. Nana Rose was not in her bed. The hospital bed had been pushed to the wall, stripped of its chaotic wires and tubes. In the center of the room, sitting in a high-backed leather wheelchair, was Nana. She was wearing a silk robe that I recognized from her performing days, a deep emerald green that made her skin look radiant despite her illness. Her hair was brushed back, her face was clean, and her eyes were open. Standing beside her like a sentinel in a charcoal suit was Arthur Sterling. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his face a mask of professional indifference. "Oh, Sophia, you are finally here," my father snapped, spotting me. "Hurry up and close the door. We don't want the nurses interrupting us." I walked in and closed the door. The click of the latch sounded like the locking of a prison cell. "Mama, you look wonderful," Linda cooed, standing up and taking a tentative step toward the wheelchair. "Truly miraculous. We were so worried yesterday, but look at you now. It is the Lord's work." Nana didn't smile. She didn't extend her hand. She just watched my mother approach with a gaze so cold it could have frozen the equator. "Sit down, Linda," Nana said. Her voice was not the weak rasp of yesterday. It was lower, steadier. It was the voice of a woman who had commanded stages in Chicago jazz clubs. Linda froze, confused by the lack of warmth. "Oh, okay. I just wanted to give you a hug." "Sit down," Nana repeated. My mother retreated to the sofa, sitting next to Jasmine, who rolled her eyes and whispered something about mood swings. Marcus cleared his throat, stepping forward with his chest puffed out. He was trying to assert dominance, trying to pretend he was the patriarch in the room. "Mother, we are all so relieved you are feeling better," he said, using his church elder voice. "But Sterling said you wanted to discuss the estate. We know this is tiring for you, so we are ready to handle the heavy lifting. Just tell us where to sign, and we will take care of the transfers. We want to make sure your legacy is secure." "My legacy," Nana repeated slowly, tasting the word. "Yes, that is exactly why we are here." Sterling stepped forward. He picked up a remote control from the small table beside him. "Before we proceed to the distribution of assets," Sterling said, his voice filling the room, "there is a matter of procedural verification we need to address. Rose wants to ensure that all recent transactions involving family property are fully transparent." "Transactions?" Jasmine asked, looking up from her phone. "What does that mean?" "It means we are going to watch a movie," Nana said. Sterling pointed the remote at the large flat-screen television mounted on the wall opposite the sofa. Usually this screen played nature documentaries for the patients. Today it went black for a second, then flickered to life with a timestamp in the top corner. August 14th, 8:30 p.m. The image was grainy but clear. It was a wide shot of a kitchen. My parents' kitchen. I watched my family's faces. At first they looked confused. Then as the figures on the screen moved, confusion turned to recognition. On the screen, my father was sitting at the kitchen island. My mother was standing behind him, leaning over his shoulder. The audio kicked in crisp and undeniable. "Try it again, Marcus," the video Linda said. "You made the loop too big. Sophia makes her S smaller. Look at her report card." The video Marcus groaned, crumpling up a piece of paper and tossing it onto a pile of other crumpled papers. "It is hard, Linda. She has that weird hesitation at the end." "Why can't we just get her to sign it? Because she won't sign it, you idiot." The video, Linda snapped. "She is obsessed with that piano. If we ask her, she will lock it down. We need the power of attorney now if we want to sell it to Vanderbilt by Friday. Just copy the signature from her lease agreement. Here." On the screen, my mother slid a piece of paper toward my father. He picked up a pen. A heavy, expensive fountain pen. The same pen he had handed me yesterday to sign the waiver. He bent over the paper, tongue protruding slightly in concentration. He scribbled something, then sat back. "How is that?" the video Marcus asked. The video Linda picked up the paper and held it to the light. "That is perfect. That looks exactly like hers. Get Deacon Miller to stamp it tomorrow. Tell him it is for a surprise gift for her so he doesn't ask questions." The video ended. The screen went black. The silence in the hospice room was absolute. It was a heavy, suffocating silence that pressed against my eardrums. I looked at my parents. My father's face had drained of all color. He was staring at the blank screen with his mouth slightly open, a look of pure, unadulterated horror. My mother was gripping her purse so hard her knuckles were white, her eyes darting around the room as if looking for an exit. Jasmine looked from the screen to her parents, her expression shifting from boredom to dawn realization. "Wait," she said, her voice high and shrill. "You guys forged it. You told me she signed it. You told me it was legal." Nana Rose leaned forward in her wheelchair. The movement was small, but it commanded the attention of everyone in the room. "I installed those cameras 3 years ago," Nana said quietly. "After I noticed cash missing from my purse during Sunday dinners. I never thought I would catch my own son committing a felony in high definition." Marcus stammered, his hands shaking as he reached out toward her. "Mother, wait. Listen. That was out of context. We were just practicing. We never—" Sterling cut him off. "Mr. Brooks, please save the insults to our intelligence. We have the original document you filed with the notary. We have the forensic analysis confirming it is a forgery. And now we have the video confession of the conspiracy. This is not a misunderstanding. This is fraud. My mother stood up, her voice trembling. You can't use that. That is an invasion of privacy. You filmed us in our own home. It is not your home, Nana snapped. The deed to that house is in my name. Linda, you and Marcus have been living there by my grace, and legally as the homeowner, I have every right to secure my property. But why? Marcus whispered, sinking onto the sofa as if his legs had given out. Why are you doing this? We are your family. You are my family. Nana said, her voice breaking for the first time. That is what makes this so pathetic. You are my family and you stole from me. You stole from Sophia. And you did it for what? A car? A club membership? We needed the money. Linda cried out, tears streaming down her face. We were drowning, Mama. The debts were piling up. We just wanted to maintain our dignity. Dignity. I spoke up for the first time. I stepped forward from the door, my voice steady. You stole my name to buy a Porsche, Mom. That is not dignity. That is vanity. My father looked at me, seeing me for the first time since I walked in. His eyes were full of fear. Sophia, he pleaded. You signed the waiver. Yesterday. You signed the family harmony agreement. You agreed not to sue. Sterling laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. The waiver, Sterling asked. You mean the document you coerced her into signing under threat of eviction and repossession? That document is inadmissible, Marcus. It is fruit of the poisonous tree. And frankly, it is just more evidence of your pattern of extortion. Jasmine stood up, grabbing her purse. I am leaving, she announced, her voice shaking. I didn't sign anything. I didn't forge anything. This has nothing to do with me. Come on, Brad. Sit down. Jasmine. Nana's voice cracked like a whip. Jasmine froze. You are driving the stolen goods, Nana said. You are the beneficiary of the crime. Do not think for 1 second you are walking out of here with that car. Sterling clicked the remote again. Now, he said, let us move on to the second exhibit, the reading of the new will. And I suggest you all get very comfortable, because nobody is leaving this room until the police arrive. The police, my mother shrieked. Nana smiled, a cold, hard smile. I told you, she said. I am not dying today, but your lifestyle certainly is. The silence in the room following Nana's declaration was heavy, broken only by the sharp intake of breath from my mother. She looked as though she had been slapped. The video screen behind Sterling had gone black, but the image of their crime seemed to be burned into the retina of everyone present. My father, Marcus, tried to regain some semblance of composure. He smoothed his tie, though his hands were shaking so badly he nearly unbuttoned his collar. Fine, he stammered, his voice thick with false bravado. So you have a video? So we cut a few corners with the paperwork. We can discuss the legality of that later. But the fact remains, Mother, that the piano is gone. The transaction is complete. We received $450,000 for it. That is a significant sum. We used it to improve the family standing. You should be thanking us for getting such a high price for a piece of old furniture. Nana Rose looked at him. It wasn't a look of anger anymore. It was a look of profound, crushing disappointment. It was the look a parent gives a child who has not just failed a test, but failed at being a human being. You think $450,000 is a high price? Nana asked softly. It is a record price, Marcus insisted, looking to Jasmine for support. Jasmine nodded vigorously, clutching her designer purse. Yeah, Nana, Jasmine chimed in. The appraiser said it was only worth maybe 80 grand because of the condition. We swindled that guy. We got over 4 times the market value. We are good at business. Nana laughed. It was a dry, raspy sound that scraped against the tension in the room. You swindled him, she repeated. Oh, you foolish, foolish children. You didn't swindle anyone. You just handed a stranger the winning lottery ticket and bragged about keeping the change. What are you talking about? Linda asked, her voice shrill. Nana leaned back in her wheelchair, folding her hands in her lap. Your father. My late husband didn't trust banks, she began. You remember that, Marcus? You remember how he used to keep cash in the walls? I remember, Marcus said dismissively. He was paranoid. He was prepared, Nana corrected. When his health started to fail in the late 90s, he liquidated a significant portion of his portfolio. He didn't want the government taking 40% in inheritance tax. He bought bearer bonds. I felt a jolt of electricity run through me. Bearer bonds. Unregistered financial instruments that belonged to whoever physically held the paper. They were as good as cash and completely untraceable. My father frowned. Bonds? What does that have to do with the piano? Nana smiled, but there was no humor in it. Where do you think he hid them? Marcus? Under the mattress? No. He wanted them to be safe. He wanted them to be in something that no one would ever throw away, something that would stay in the family. She pointed a shaking finger at the empty space on the screen where the piano used to be. He hired a luthier from Germany to modify the Steinway, Nana whispered. Under the soundboard beneath the cast iron plate, there is a false bottom lined with cedar. That is where he put them. My mother stopped breathing. Jasmine dropped her phone. It hit the floor with a loud crack, but she didn't even blink. How much, my father whispered. His face was gray. Nana held his gaze. $2 million in municipal bearer bonds, she said, maturing at 5% annually since 1998. The room spun. I grabbed the doorframe to steady myself. $2 million. My parents hadn't just sold a piano. They had handed a stranger $2 million in cash, plus interest inside a wooden box. No. Marcus gasped. No. That is not possible. We would have seen them. You wouldn't have seen anything because you don't look past the surface of anything, Nana snapped. You saw old wood and thought trash. You saw a quick payday and stopped asking questions. That collector, Mr. Vanderbilt? He knew, or he found out the moment he inspected it. That is why he paid you $450,000 so quickly. He was buying a gold mine for the price of a shovel. My mother let out a low, animalistic wail. She slumped forward, burying her face in her hands. We gave it away, she sobbed. We gave it all away. Jasmine turned on her father, her eyes wild. You said you checked it. You said you searched the drawers. You lost $2 million. That is my money. That is my inheritance. It is not your money, Nana roared, her voice suddenly thundering with strength. It never was. It was Sophia's. She turned to me, her eyes softening. It was yours, Sophia. That is why I left the piano to you. I knew you would never sell it. I knew you would keep it safe until I could tell you the secret. I was going to give you the combination on your 30th birthday. I felt tears streaming down my face. She had trusted me with a fortune, and I had failed to protect it. But it is gone now. Nana continued, turning back to the trio of devastation on the sofa. You stole it. You sold it. And you wasted the petty cash you got in exchange on a car and a country club membership you can't afford. But we can get it back, Marcus shouted, jumping up. We can sue Vanderbilt. We can tell the police it was a mistake. Sterling stepped forward, clearing his throat. The sound was like a gavel striking a block. I am afraid that is impossible, Mr. Brooks, Sterling said coldly. As you so proudly pointed out, you have a bill of sale. You have a notarized power of attorney. You legally transferred ownership of the item and all its contents. If you sue, you will have to admit to the forgery. You will have to admit to the fraud. You will go to prison, and Mr. Vanderbilt will still keep the bonds because he purchased the item in good faith from a seller who claimed to have legal authority. Marcus sank back down, defeated. He looked like a man who had just watched his house burn down while holding a bucket of gasoline. So it is gone, he whispered. The $2 million is gone. Yes, Sterling said, but that is only the beginning of your losses today. He opened a leather binder and pulled out a document printed on thick cream-colored paper. This is the last will and testament of Rose Sterling, updated this morning at 8 a.m., Sterling announced. My mother looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. The trust, she whispered. The 15 million. We still have the trust. We are still the heirs. Sterling adjusted his glasses and began to read. Article 9, Section C. The bad actor clause. He looked over the top of the paper at my parents. It reads as follows. Any beneficiary who is found to have committed acts of theft, fraud, forgery, or financial abuse against the estate or the grantor, whether convicted in a court of law or proven by a preponderance of evidence, shall be immediately and irrevocably disinherited. He paused to let the words sink in. Disinherited, Sterling repeated. That means zero, nothing, not a cent. But we didn't mean to, Linda screamed. We are family. You can't cut us out. The evidence is undeniable. Sterling continued, ignoring her outburst. The forgery of Sophia's signature, the sale of the piano, the conspiracy to evict Sophia from the Midtown condo. It all constitutes financial abuse. By trying to steal a little, you have forfeited everything. He closed the binder. Effective immediately, the Golden Horizon Trust is closed to Marcus Brooks, Linda Brooks, and Jasmine Brooks. You are removed from the deed of the family home. You are removed from the life insurance policies. You are removed from the residuary estate. My father sat there, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on dry land. He had walked into this room thinking he was a millionaire. He was leaving it homeless, bankrupt, and facing criminal charges. Jasmine stood up, her face a mask of panic. What about the car? She asked, her voice trembling. The Porsche. It is in my name. You can't take that. Sterling smiled. It was the smile of a shark that had just bitten a seal in half. Actually, Ms. Brooks, since the vehicle was purchased with the proceeds of a crime, it is considered contraband. And since the funds used to buy it legally belonged to Sophia, he turned to me. I believe the car belongs to her now. The silence that followed Sterling's declaration was shattered not by a scream, but by a polite, heavy knock on the door of the VIP suite. It was a sound that signaled the end of the private family drama and the beginning of a public nightmare. Before my father could even process the fact that he had been disinherited, the door swung open. 2 men and a woman walked in. They were not nurses. They were not doctors. They wore cheap suits and serious expressions, and the badges hanging from their belts caught the harsh fluorescent light of the hospital room. One of the men stepped forward, his eyes scanning the room before landing squarely on my parents. Marcus Brooks and Linda Brooks, he asked, his voice devoid of any warmth. My father stood up, his legs shaking so violently that he had to lean against the wall for support. I am Marcus Brooks, he whispered. Who are you? I am Detective Miller with the Economic Crimes Unit, the man said, pulling a folded paper from his jacket pocket. We are here to execute an arrest warrant. Arrest warrant, my mother shrieked, clutching her pearls. For what? We haven't done anything. This is a hospital. My mother is dying. Nana Rose sat in her wheelchair, her face impassive. She didn't look dying. She looked like a judge watching a sentence being carried out. Detective Miller ignored my mother's hysterics and began to read from the warrant. Marcus and Linda Brooks, you are under arrest for first-degree forgery, felony wire fraud, elder financial abuse, and conspiracy to commit theft over $1 million. He motioned to his partners. Cuff them. The room erupted into chaos. My mother began to wail, a high-pitched animalistic sound that made my skin crawl. She threw herself toward Nana's wheelchair, falling to her knees. Mama, tell them it was a misunderstanding. We are your family. You can't let them take us to jail. I am your daughter. Nana looked down at the woman clawing at her silk robe. She didn't pull away, but she didn't reach out either. You ceased to be my daughter the moment you stole my signature, Nana said, her voice cutting through the wailing like a blade. You are just a thief who happens to share my DNA. The female officer grabbed my mother's arm and hauled her to her feet. Linda struggled, kicking and screaming, her carefully styled hair coming undone. Don't touch me. Do you know who I am? We are members of the Royal Pines Country Club. You can't treat me like a common criminal. You have the right to remain silent, the officer recited calmly, snapping the cold metal cuffs onto my mother's wrists. My father was less combative but more pathetic. As the male officer spun him around and pushed him against the wall to frisk him, Marcus looked at Sterling with pleading eyes. Sterling, please. You are a lawyer. Do something. We can work this out. I can pay it back. We can sell the house. Sterling didn't even blink. I represent the victim, Mr. Brooks. I suggest you save your breath for the public defender. And regarding the house, you cannot sell it. It is no longer yours to sell. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut on my father's wrists seemed to echo in the room louder than any scream. This was the man who had lectured me about morality. This was the man who had sat at the head of the table and called me a failure. Now he was a prisoner stripped of his dignity in front of the very people he had tried to defraud. Jasmine was standing in the corner, pressing herself into the drywall, as if she could disappear. She was trembling, her eyes wide with terror, clutching her designer purse to her chest like a shield. The detective turned his attention to her. "You are Jasmine Brooks?" he asked. Jasmine nodded, unable to speak. "We have reason to believe you are in possession of stolen property, specifically a white Porsche Cayenne Turbo GT purchased with funds illicitly obtained from the sale of the victim's assets." He held out his hand. "The keys, Ms. Brooks. Now." Jasmine shook her head frantically, tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. "No," she whispered. "No, you can't take it. It is my car. My name is on the title. It is for my brand. The title is invalid because the funds were stolen," the detective said, his voice hardening. "It is evidence in a federal investigation. Hand them over, or we will add obstruction of justice to the list of charges your parents are facing. Do you want to join them in the squad car?" Jasmine looked at her parents, who were being led toward the door in cuffs. She looked at the detective's stern face. With a sob that sounded like a child's tantrum, she reached into her purse and pulled out the glossy white key fob. She held it for a second, her fingers white-knuckled around the plastic. It was the symbol of everything she thought she deserved. It was her status. It was her victory over me. "Give it to him, Jasmine," my father yelled from the doorway. "Don't make it worse." Jasmine dropped the key into the detective's hand. I watched it fall. It hit the detective's palm with a dull thud. The detective turned to me. "Ms. Sophia Brooks." "Yes," I said, stepping forward. "Sterling tells us you are the newly appointed trustee of the estate. Technically, once we process the vehicle as evidence and clear the title, it will be released to you. We will need you to come down to the station next week to sign the release forms." I nodded. "Thank you, Detective." Jasmine let out a scream of pure rage. She turned to me, her face twisted and ugly. "You did this, you jealous witch! You planned this! You wanted my car!" "I didn't want your car, Jasmine," I said calmly. "I wanted my grandmother's piano. You are the one who decided a Porsche was worth more than your parents' freedom." Jasmine turned to Brad, who had been standing silently by the window this entire time, watching the scene unfold with a detached expression. He hadn't moved to help Linda. He hadn't tried to comfort Marcus. He hadn't even looked at Jasmine. Jasmine cried, reaching for him. "Do something. Call your dad's lawyer. They are taking the car. They are taking Mom and Dad. We need bail money." Brad took a step back, holding his hands up as if Jasmine were contagious. "We," Brad said, his voice cold and unfamiliar. "There is no we, Jasmine." "What?" Jasmine froze. "What are you talking about?" "I am talking about the fact that I just watched your parents get arrested for a felony," Brad said, smoothing his suit jacket. "I am talking about the fact that you drove around in a stolen car and bragged about it. My family has a reputation to uphold in this city. The Remingtons do not associate with criminals." "But I didn't know," Jasmine pleaded, grabbing his lapel. "Brad, baby, I didn't know they forged the signature. I am a victim too. Get off me," Brad snapped, shoving her hand away with genuine disgust. You knew the piano was Sophia's. You laughed about it at dinner. You are just as guilty as they are. You are just lucky you are too stupid to be the one who signed the paper. He looked at Sterling, then at Nana Rose. Mrs. Sterling. I want to go on record right now, Brad stated clearly. I had absolutely no knowledge of this scheme. I was told the money came from a legitimate inheritance advance. I am completely cooperating with any investigation. You coward, my father shouted from the hallway as the officers dragged him away. You ate at my table. You drove that car. I am also announcing my intention to file for an annulment, Brad continued, ignoring my father. Or a divorce. Whichever is faster. I am not going to be married to a woman whose dowry was stolen money. Jasmine fell to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. Brad, please don't leave me. I have nowhere to go. They kicked me out of the house. I don't have a car. Brad looked down at her with the same sneer he had given me at the dinner party just 2 days ago. Call an Uber, Jasmine, he said. Oh, wait. You probably can't afford one. He looked at me. His eyes were no longer mocking. They were fearful. He nodded once, a quick, jerky motion of respect born of terror. Sophia, good luck with everything. And then he walked out. He stepped over Jasmine's sobbing form on the floor, walked past the police officers, and disappeared down the hallway, without looking back. The room was suddenly quiet, save for Jasmine's jagged breathing and the distant sound of sirens approaching the hospital entrance to transport my parents. I looked at Nana. She was tired. The adrenaline was fading, and the reality of what she had just done to her own son was setting in, but there was no regret in her eyes. Only resolution. Is it done? Nana asked Sterling. It is done, Sterling said, closing his file. The cancer has been cut out. I walked over to Jasmine. She was curled in a ball on the hospital floor, surrounded by the wreckage of her life. No husband, no car, no money, no home. Jasmine, I said. She looked up at me, her mascara running down her face in black streaks. What, she spat. Are you happy now? I reached into my tote bag. I pulled out a $20 bill. I dropped it on the floor next to her. Brad was right, I said. You are going to need a ride. But don't come to my apartment. The basement is closed. I turned my back on her and walked over to Nana's wheelchair. Let's go home, Nana, I said, taking the handles. Not my house, Nana whispered. Take me to your condo. The one they wanted to sell. I want to see where the only honest Brooks lives. We wheeled her out of the room, leaving Jasmine alone on the floor, with the $20 the only inheritance she would ever receive. The weeks following the arrest were a blur of legal motions and public humiliation that swept through my parents' lives like a hurricane. They managed to secure bail only by liquidating their retirement accounts, a desperate move that left them with nothing but their freedom and their shame. The fallout was immediate and brutal. The Royal Pines Country Club didn't just revoke their membership, they issued a lifetime ban, citing a violation of the moral turpitude clause in the bylaws. The church, which had been my father's stage for so many years, turned its back on him completely. After Deacon Miller was indicted as an accomplice for the notary fraud, the new church board sent a formal letter to my parents asking them to find another place of worship. They were pariahs in the very community they had tried so hard to impress. I remember driving past my childhood home a month after the arrest. There was a for sale sign in the yard. It wasn't a standard sign. It was a foreclosure auction notice. My parents hadn't just lost their reputation. They had lost the ability to sustain their lifestyle. They were forced to sell everything to pay for their criminal defense attorneys and the restitution demanded by the court. I saw my mother's car, the Lexus she loved so much, being loaded onto a tow truck. I saw my father standing on the porch, looking older and smaller than I had ever seen him, arguing with a man in a suit who was simply shaking his head. They had called me, of course. In the first few days, my phone rang non-stop. They pleaded, they threatened. They tried to guilt me into dropping the charges or paying their legal fees. But I didn't answer. I had blocked their numbers. I communicated only through Sterling. I had finally learned that protecting my peace was more important than protecting their feelings. But amidst their destruction, there was a beacon of hope. My first act as the trustee of the Golden Horizon estate was to track down the Steinway. I was terrified that Mr. Vanderbilt the collector would refuse to return it, or worse, that he had discovered the bonds and claimed them as his own. I called him personally. I explained everything. I told him about the fraud, the forgery, and the sentimental value of the instrument. I didn't mention the bonds. I held my breath as I waited for his response. Mr. Vanderbilt was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke with a kindness that brought me to tears. He told me that he had sensed something was wrong with the transaction. He said my parents seemed too eager, too desperate. He hadn't touched the piano since it arrived at his warehouse. He agreed to sell it back to me for exactly what he paid, not a penny more. He said that art carries the energy of its owner, and he didn't want a piece that carried so much sorrow. When the movers brought the piano into my condo, I felt like a part of my body was being returned to me. I watched them set it up in the living room, the polished black wood gleaming under the lights. As soon as they left, I locked the door and crawled under the instrument. I found the false bottom Nana had described. My hands were shaking as I pried it open. And there they were, the bearer bonds, $2 million in yellowed paper sitting there quietly untouched by the greed that had swirled around them. My parents had sold a fortune for pennies, and they had never even known it. I placed the bonds in a secure bank vault the next morning, adding them to the trust that would now support artists for generations to come. 6 months have passed since that day. The world feels different now, lighter. I am no longer the Sophia who apologizes for taking up space. I am Sophia Brooks, the director of the Rose Sterling Arts Foundation. I spend my days reviewing grant applications, visiting galleries, and ensuring that young musicians have instruments worthy of their talent. I have not spoken to my parents or Jasmine since the trial sentencing. I heard through the grapevine that they are living in a small apartment on the other side of town, working retail jobs to make ends meet. Jasmine is apparently trying to become a fitness influencer, but without the Porsche and the family money, her brand has collapsed. I don't wish them harm. I simply don't think of them at all. They are characters in a chapter I have finished writing. The only thing that matters is here in this room. It is late afternoon. The sun is setting, casting long golden shadows across the floorboards of my condo. Nana Rose is lying in a hospital bed we set up right next to the Steinway. She fought hard. She held on through the trial, through the recovery of the assets, and through the launch of the foundation. She wanted to see it all. She wanted to make sure I was safe. But now her fight is ending. She is frail, her skin like delicate paper, but her eyes are still clear. She looks at me, and then she looks at the piano keys. "Play for me, Sophia," she whispers. Her voice is so faint I have to lean in to hear it. "Play my song." I sit at the piano bench. It feels solid and grounding beneath me. I lift the fallboard and rest my fingers on the ivory keys. I take a deep breath, inhaling the scent of old wood and lemon oil. I begin to play. "I Loves You, Porgy." It is the Gershwin tune she made famous in the jazz clubs of Chicago 50 years ago. The melody is slow, melancholic, but achingly beautiful. It speaks of love that endures, of strength found in vulnerability. As I play, the music fills the apartment, wrapping around us like a warm blanket. I watch Nana. Her eyes are closed. A small, peaceful smile touches her lips. Her breathing is slowing down, syncing with the rhythm of the song. She isn't in pain. She isn't worried. She is just listening. She is listening to the sound of her legacy living on. She is listening to the sound of her granddaughter, who finally found her voice. I pour all my love, all my gratitude, and all my grief into the notes. I play for the years we lost. I play for the secrets we kept. I play for the justice we won. The music swells to a crescendo and then tapers off into a gentle, lingering silence. I hold the final chord, letting the vibration hum in the air until it fades completely. I turn to look at her. "Nana," I whisper. There is no answer. Her chest is still. The smile is frozen on her face, a permanent testament to her final victory. She is gone. She slipped away on the last note, carried out of this world on the wings of the music she loved so much. I don't scream. I don't collapse. I simply reach out and take her hand. It is still warm. I kiss her knuckles, the same hands that signed the papers that set me free. Thank you, I say into the silence. Thank you for choosing me. I sit there for a long time as the sun dips below the horizon, plunging the room into twilight. I am alone, but I am not lonely. I have the music. I have the truth. And I have a future that is entirely my own. My parents tried to bury me, but they didn't know I was a seed. They watered me with their cruelty, and I grew a garden of thorns and roses that they can never touch. If you are watching this and you feel like you are being buried by the people who are supposed to love you, please remember this. You are not dirt. You are a seed. Wait for your season. Protect your legacy. And when the time comes, don't be afraid to play your own song, even if it shakes the ground beneath their feet. Thank you for being part of this journey with me. This is Sophia signing off. And to my family, if you are watching this from your rented apartment, listening to the sound of my success, I hope you enjoy the music. Looking back, I realized that the greatest betrayal wasn't the theft of the piano, but the revelation that my family valued status over my soul. But that betrayal became my liberation. It taught me that silence is not always weakness. Sometimes it is the sound of a strategy being formed. I learned that you cannot save people who are determined to destroy themselves, but you can always save yourself. True family is not defined by blood, but by honor, loyalty, and the choice to protect one another. If this story of justice and resilience resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more. Have you ever had to cut ties to find your peace? Let me know in the comments below.